Okay, I was able to get the bolts started for the EGR, the upper connection on the plenum. I'm now going to slide, before I tighten it down, I'm going to slide this gasket into place, and you'll see it has, instead of closed holes, it has opened holes on the end, so it'll just slide in from the side after the bolts have already been started. Makes the process a lot easier. Don't forget to put this gasket back in. Okay, now that I've got the EGR tube hooked back up, I'm going to go back to the left side of the engine, and in reverse order I'm going to put the coil pack back in, and I'm going to put the spark plug wires back onto the coil, and then we're going to put that alternator bracket back in. So here's the coil pack that we had put to one side, and it's going to mount back here to the left side of the plenum. And I've got my four 10mm mounting bolts. I'm going to give each of these bolts a little shot of WD-40 before they go back in. It is a steel to aluminum connection. Anytime you have two metals, different types of metals crossing each other, you have an opportunity for corrosion and bolts freezing up, so it's nice to keep them lubricated. I'm going to do this left upper side bolt first, just to get the thing in position. Might actually need a 10mm socket to get that going. Once I've got that thing sort of loosely attached, the next thing I want to pay attention to is this wiring harness bracket, which secures with the other nut on the left hand top side. And so put that through the bracket and then through the coil pack and into the top of the intake plenum. And after I've got that one started, then we'll go to the lower bolts. Get those wires out of the way for a second. Each of these bolts, I'm just starting them into the threads. I'm not going all the way. Now that I know everything is going to hook up okay, that it's started, I'll go ahead and cinch them down with a ratchet. Start with the lower ones. Get it all the way snug, but not tight. Go to the left, bottom one. Get it snug, but not tight. Top right. Snug but not tight. Left top, snug but not tight. Now I'm going to go back and tighten them up. tighten these up. Since you're screwing it into aluminum, you don't want to go super tight. Just a little past snug. And then we're going to put on our wires, and we're going to put them on according to the numbering on the coil. So we start off with number 3 goes over here, then number 1, then number 5. So I'm looking for number 3, my first candidate. There it is, number 3. That goes onto the coil pack. Then the second one is number 1. That goes onto the coil pack. And then the last one is number 5 there. And put that onto the coil pack. Make sure you hear or feel a click. That each spark plug terminal has, or coil pack terminal has seated itself. And I can rip off those numbering wires that I used. Then I'm going to go to the alternator bracket. There it is, that triangular bracket. I'm going to take out that top screw. It's the big 15 millimeter. I'm going to take out these other screws. Keep them in orientation. That's another 15 millimeter. And these are the smaller 13 millimeters. And so this slips back in here. Put the big 15 back in first. That goes on top. Just put it in loosely. And I'll go with the smaller 13 millimeters. If stuff is loose, then the bolts will go in easily. They'll start easily. So all those bolts are started. And the last one is the one that actually goes through the alternator. Okay, all those bolts are snug. I'm just going to torque them down, and then we'll move to the other side of the engine. Okay, we're back over at the other side of the engine, and before we start with all those vacuum lines and connectors, you'll remember that supporting strut that's on the back side of the plenum that attaches to the rear head, and that's secured with this 15 millimeter bolt, and we don't want to forget about putting that back in, which would be easy to forget. So I'm going to put that back in right now before we get all those lines and accelerator throttle cable in the way. Okay, we're back over at the right side of the engine near the throttle body, and I've been gradually reconnecting all of these wire connectors in the background and taking off my little blue tags that tell me where all those connectors went to. And so the next thing I'm going to do is reconnect the throttle cables, and you'll remember there's this cam here, and you've got to rotate the cam as far as you can to get slack in the cables, put them through the little slot at the top, rotate them back, do the same with the second cable, and then you're done. The throttle cables are reconnected. Now I'm going to go back to connecting all of these little vacuum lines, and the first thing I got to do is connect up this wire connector that went to some type sort of sensor in the plenum. Snap that in. Down here I had my D and my D, so that goes to this lower port, lower vacuum port down here. So I'll strip off the D tags, the D tape, and connect that one up. Job done on that one. Next I've got the C line, and so I'll have to look for the line that was also labeled C. That was this one. And so I strip it off of that port, put the line back on, and take that label off of that line. Job done on that one. Then I'll go to the B line. That was the big vacuum hose for the power brake booster, and that went to this B port up here. Strip that off. Put it back on, strip off that tag, and here we've got some a clamp for that vacuum line. So we just have to get some hose clamp pliers. They've got the little indents there to grab this clamp, compress it, move it up the line to its proper position, and clamp that vacuum line. And then last we've got the A line to the A port. Strip that off, put the vacuum line back on, strip off that tag. And job done on the vacuum lines. Okay, now we're going to put the air box back in, the water air separator. And the way that goes back in is first you put on the throttle body part. Just put that on there in that fashion, and then rotate this thing that goes into the air filter box. Rotate that downward. And press it down over the fitting down there. And then you want to tighten up the hose clamps on the throttle body side where the rubber boot is that connects to the throttle body. Doesn't have to be real tight, just snug. And then there's another one down here. And once you snug that up, then the last two things are the screws that mount the air box to the radiator support. Now, I mentioned an air ratchet before to speed things up, and I haven't used it much during this video because I've been kind of going slow-mo, but I'm going to give you guys a little treat and show you what an air ratchet looks like. Okay, I'm thinking that we are done with the entire reassembly of the engine part of this. We haven't put in the wiper cowling yet, but I'm going to test run this first to see how it looks, both to make sure there's no leaks, fuel leaks, anything like that, to see if it's running without a miss, running smoothly. And then I'm going to run it on the OBD2 diagnostic computer and see if it's still showing those fault codes that we were seeing earlier for the #1 fuel injector. Okay, so we've started the engine, and appears to be running smoothly. It's making the normal kind of Chrysler noises. One of the things you want to check for is fuel leaks. So we're looking along the fuel rail here, and I especially want to check back here, make sure that that quick connect is still holding, is not leaking. This fuel hose doesn't look to be leaking. The fuel rail looks good. In back, behind the manifold, to the extent I can see it, I don't see any fuel squirting around. So everything looks pretty good. So I'm going to go check the OBD2 diagnostic scanner and see what that shows. Okay, I've hooked up the OBD2 scanner down here underneath the dashboard. It's working away while the car is running, and I've told the app on my smartphone to scan for fault codes, and it is showing 0 faults. So this is great news. All of my cylinder 1 faults have apparently been cured by the installation of that new fuel injector. So time to party. Okay, that's the finished job. It runs, no fault codes, all fault codes have been cleared, and we got the windshield wiper cowling installed, and the van's ready to go. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and maybe felt empowered that you might be able to take on a job like that yourself. Planning, preparation, and meticulous chronology of what you took apart and where it came from, I think, are your paths to success.